It was a cold, windy evening at a luxury hotel in New York City, where the elite came to indulge in its extravagant suites and world-class service. The lobby was bustling with activity, guests checking in, bellboys carting luggage, and the soft clinking of glasses from the bar nearby. Amid the opulence, an elderly man shuffled in, his clothes plain and worn, carrying an old leather briefcase. His gray hair was neatly combed, but his appearance seemed out of place in the grandeur of the hotel. The man walked up to the front desk, greeted by the sharp gaze of the manager, Mr. Ellis. Dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, Ellis prided himself on maintaining the hotel's exclusivity. His eyes scanned the elderly man from head to toe, his lips curling slightly in disdain. "Can I help you, sir?" Ellis asked, his tone polite but lacking warmth. "Yes," the man replied with a kind smile. "I'd like a room for the night, please." Ellis arched an eyebrow, glancing at the man's scuffed shoes and modest appearance. "This is a 5-star establishment," he said, his words carefully chosen, but dripping with judgment. "Are you sure you wouldn't prefer a more affordable option?" The man's smile faltered slightly, but he remained composed. "No, this is fine. I've stayed here before." Ellis frowned, skeptical. "Well, we require payment up front," he said, his tone firm. "The cheapest room starts at $2,000 a night." The elderly man nodded and opened his briefcase, revealing a stack of neatly organized documents, a few pens, and an old-fashioned checkbook. He flipped it open and began writing. Ellis's expression hardened. "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't accept personal checks. Credit card only." The man paused, looking up. "I'm afraid I don't have a card with me at the moment," he said calmly. Ellis's patience wore thin. "Then I'm afraid I can't help you," he snapped. "This is a high-end hotel, not a charity." The words hit harder than they should have, but the man remained stoic. He closed his briefcase slowly, his movements deliberate. "I understand," he said quietly. "But are you sure there's no room for me here tonight?" Ellis's irritation turned into outright rudeness. "Look, sir, we have standards. We can't just let anyone walk in off the street and—" "Is there a problem here?" interrupted a soft voice from behind. It was a younger concierge, her expression uncertain as she glanced between the two men. "No problem," Ellis said quickly, dismissing her. "This gentleman was just leaving." The elderly man hesitated for a moment, his kind smile returning, though it carried a tinge of sadness now. "Very well," he said, his voice still calm. "Thank you for your time." He turned and walked out into the night, the automatic doors closing behind him. Inside, Ellis shook his head, muttering something about wasting time as he returned to his duties. Outside, the man pulled out his phone and made a quiet call. "Yes," he said simply. "I'll need someone here within the hour." His voice, though soft, carried an unmistakable authority, and with that, he leaned against a streetlight, waiting as the cold wind continued to blow. Something about his demeanor suggested this story was far from over. An hour later, the hotel lobby had settled into its usual rhythm. Mr. Ellis strolled through, barking instructions to the staff and ensuring everything was running smoothly. He was in his element, his sharp eyes scanning for any sign of imperfection. Outside, the automatic doors slid open, and a sleek black limousine rolled up to the valet. The polished vehicle gleamed under the hotel's lights, catching the attention of everyone nearby. Ellis paused mid-stride, intrigued. Out stepped a man in a tailored suit, his every movement radiating authority. He carried a tablet in one hand and a purposeful expression on his face. The suited man walked straight up to the front desk, his footsteps echoing through the marble-floored lobby. "I'm here for Mr. Warren Buffett," he said briskly, his voice clear and commanding. Ellis froze, the name ringing in his ears like a warning bell. For a moment, he wondered if he'd misheard. "Excuse me, who are you looking for?" he asked, trying to mask his surprise. "Warren Buffett," the man repeated without hesitation. "He was here earlier. Where is he?" Ellis blinked, his mind racing. I don't believe we had anyone by that name check in," he stammered. The suited man's expression darkened. "He didn't check in because he was turned away," he said coldly, his tone carrying an edge that sent a shiver through Ellis. Before Ellis could respond, the automatic doors opened again, and Warren Buffett himself walked in, his unassuming demeanor unchanged. He looked exactly as he had earlier, plain clothes, old leather briefcase in hand. But now, the air around him seemed different. "Ah, there you are," Buffett said to the suited man, his voice warm and calm. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "Of course, sir," the man replied, his tone respectful. Ellis's mouth went dry. He stared at Buffett, trying to reconcile the image before him with the name he'd just heard. You're Mr. Warren Buffett?" he stuttered, his confidence crumbling. Buffett turned to Ellis, his kind smile returning, but this time it carried a sharper edge. "That's correct," he said simply. "And you're the manager, I assume?" Ellis nodded stiffly, his mind spinning. This couldn't be real. The man he had dismissed so rudely earlier was one of the wealthiest and most respected individuals in the world. "I must say," Buffett continued, his voice calm but firm, "your hospitality left quite an impression." Ellis felt his face flush with embarrassment. "Mr. Buffett, I didn't realize who I was?" Buffett interrupted, his tone still even, but with a hint of steel. "Or didn't care to treat me with basic respect?" Ellis opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Around the lobby, staff and guests were now watching intently, their curiosity and shock evident. Buffett turned to the suited man beside him. "Would you mind stepping outside and bringing in the rest of the team?" he asked. The man nodded and walked back toward the limousine. Moments later, 3 more individuals entered the hotel, each dressed in impeccable business attire. They carried briefcases and folders, their expressions focused and professional. Ellis stared at the group, panic bubbling just beneath the surface. Whatever was about to happen, he knew it wouldn't end well for him. Buffett gestured toward a nearby seating area. "Let's take a moment to discuss the future of this hotel," he said, his tone calm but deliberate. Ellis's stomach dropped. The future? What did that mean? He watched helplessly as Buffett and his team settled into the lounge, the weight of the situation pressing down on him like a storm cloud, ready to burst. The weight of the moment grew heavier as Warren Buffett and his team sat calmly in the lounge, their presence commanding the entire lobby's attention. Ellis hovered nearby, his mind racing for a way to salvage the situation. The other staff members kept their distance, casting uneasy glances toward the scene unfolding before them. Buffett gestured for Ellis to join him. "Why don't you sit with us, Mr. Ellis?" he said, his tone polite, but laced with authority. Ellis hesitated, then reluctantly took a seat across from Buffett. His palms were sweaty, and he fidgeted with his tie as he tried to steady his breathing. Buffett placed his old leather briefcase on the table and opened it. Inside were neatly organized papers and a single yellow notepad. He took out the notepad and a pen, writing something down slowly before looking up at Ellis. "Tell me, Mr. Ellis," Buffett began, his voice calm, "how long have you been managing this hotel?" 3 years, sir," Ellis replied, his voice shaky. Buffett nodded thoughtfully. 3 years is a long time. You must have a good sense of how to treat your guests by now. Ellis swallowed hard. Of course, sir. We pride ourselves on excellent customer service. Buffett leaned back slightly, raising an eyebrow. Do you? Because I'm struggling to reconcile that claim with the way I was treated earlier. Ellis opened his mouth, but Buffett held up a hand to stop him. I came here as an ordinary man. Buffett continued, his tone steady. I didn't announce my name. I didn't demand special treatment. All I wanted was a room for the night. And instead, I was judged based on my appearance and turned away without so much as a second chance. The words hit Ellis like a hammer. He could feel the eyes of the staff and guests burning into him, their judgment clear. Sir, I didn't realize who you were, Ellis stammered, his face flushing with embarrassment. Buffett's expression remained calm, but there was no mistaking the edge in his voice. And if I weren't Warren Buffett, would that make it acceptable to treat me, or anyone else, that way? Ellis couldn't answer. The silence that followed was deafening. Buffett leaned forward, his gaze piercing. This hotel represents more than just luxury and fine service. It's a place where people expect to be treated with dignity, regardless of their status. That's the foundation of any successful business. Respect for the individual. Ellis nodded quickly, desperate to appease him. I understand, sir. I'll make changes, I promise. Buffett exchanged a glance with one of his executives, who pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. I think you misunderstand the situation, Mr. Ellis, Buffett said, his tone softening just slightly. This isn't just about an apology or a promise. This is about accountability. Ellis stared at the folder, his hands trembling as he opened it. Inside was a formal notice, clear and direct. Termination of employment. His heart sank. Sir, please, he began, but Buffett cut him off. I've already spoken with the owners of this property, Buffett explained. Effective immediately, this hotel, and several others in this chain, are under new management. Ellis's face went pale as realization dawned. Buffett wasn't just a disgruntled customer. He was the new owner. You turned away the man who now owns this hotel, one of Buffett's executives added, her tone sharp. And that's a mistake you won't be able to undo. Ellis sat frozen, the weight of his actions finally crashing down on him. Meanwhile, Buffett stood, gathering his things with a calm efficiency. This isn't personal, Mr. Ellis, Buffett said as he prepared to leave. It's business, and in business, there's no room for arrogance or disrespect. I hope you take this as a lesson. With that, Buffett turned and walked toward the elevators, leaving Ellis slumped in his chair, his career shattered in an instant. Around the lobby, the staff and guests watched in stunned silence, the air heavy with the impact of what had just happened. For Warren Buffett, it wasn't about revenge. It was about setting a standard, one that would echo far beyond the walls of this hotel. And as the elevator doors closed, his calm, determined expression left no doubt. The richest man in the world had just shown what true leadership looked like. Warren Buffett disappeared into the elevator. The weight of his words lingered in the air. The staff exchanged glances, their faces a mixture of shock and awe. Ellis remained seated, staring blankly at the termination notice in his hands. His mind raced, replaying every smug comment and dismissive gesture he'd made earlier that evening. He felt trapped, his arrogance having led him straight into this downfall. The lobby slowly returned to its rhythm, but the energy had shifted. A quiet buzz filled the air as the staff whispered amongst themselves. A young bellhop leaned toward the receptionist. "Did you see that?" he murmured. "The man owns the entire hotel now. Can you imagine? I've never seen anything like it, the receptionist replied, her voice low. He didn't raise his voice once. He just handled it. Upstairs, Buffett settled into one of the hotel's finest suites. It was a luxurious space, with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a breathtaking view of the city. Yet, despite the opulence, Buffett remained as understated as ever. He placed his worn leather briefcase on the desk and sank into an armchair, his expression thoughtful. One of his executives, the older man who had accompanied him, knocked softly before entering. "Sir," he began, "I wanted to confirm that all the necessary changes have been set in motion. The previous management team is being notified, and new leadership will be in place by tomorrow." Buffett nodded, his gaze fixed on the city lights outside. "Good," he said. "But I want more than just new leadership. I want a culture change. Start with training programs. Make sure every employee, from the front desk to the kitchen staff, understands what this place stands for." The executive made a note, but hesitated. "What about Ellis?" he asked carefully. "He's clearly unfit for this role, but do you want to offer him an opportunity elsewhere in the chain?" Buffett's lips pressed into a thin line. "Ellis needs to learn humility," he said after a moment. "This isn't about punishment. It's about growth. Let him go. If he truly wants to redeem himself, he'll find a way to do so." The executive nodded, understanding the wisdom in Buffett's words. Downstairs, Ellis finally gathered the courage to stand. His face was pale, his usual confidence replaced by a hollow, defeated expression. The same concierge who had witnessed the earlier exchange approached him cautiously. "Mr. Ellis," she said softly, "are you okay?" Ellis glanced at her, his pride urging him to snap back with a sarcastic remark. But the fire was gone from his eyes. Instead, he sighed heavily. "I didn't think this could happen to me," he admitted, his voice low. "I thought I was untouchable." The concierge didn't reply. Instead, she stepped back, leaving Ellis alone in the emptying lobby. For the first time in years, Ellis felt small, not because of the loss of his job, but because he realized how deeply he had failed as a leader and a person. Meanwhile, Buffett's calm leadership continued to ripple through the hotel. Staff who had once felt overlooked or undervalued now stood taller, their spirits lifted by the idea that respect and kindness could come from the very top. As Buffett prepared to rest for the night, his phone buzzed with a message from one of his executives. "The team is ready for tomorrow's meeting. They're inspired by your actions, sir." Buffett smiled faintly as he replied, "Good. This is just the beginning." Outside, the city pulsed with life, but inside the hotel, a transformation was taking root. One built not on wealth or power, but on humility and respect. Warren Buffett had proven that even the richest man in the world could lead by example, and in doing so, he had set a standard that would resonate far beyond the walls of this establishment. The next morning, the hotel was buzzing with energy, unlike anything the staff had felt before. Word of Warren Buffett's quiet but decisive actions had spread throughout the ranks. Employees who had once felt invisible now carried themselves with pride, knowing their work mattered to someone at the very top. Buffett began his day early, meeting with the new leadership team in one of the hotel's grand conference rooms. The executives sat around the table, eager but slightly nervous under Buffett's calm, yet commanding presence. "Let's get one thing straight," Buffett began, his voice even. "This isn't just about changing management. It's about changing how we treat people, our staff, our guests, and anyone who walks through these doors." One of the executives, a younger woman with a background in hospitality, nodded. Understood, sir. We've already drafted plans for additional training sessions on respect and customer service. Buffett leaned back, his sharp gaze assessing the group. Good. But remember, training is just the start. Leadership begins with example. If the people at the top don't embody these values, no amount of training will matter. The team exchanged determined glances, understanding the gravity of the moment. Downstairs, the staff gathered for a morning briefing, led by one of Buffett's trusted executives. The mood was different, hopeful, energized. The bellhop from the night before couldn't hide his excitement as he whispered to the receptionist, "I can't believe I work for Warren Buffett now." The receptionist smiled. It's not just about working for him. It's about what he's doing for all of us. As the briefing ended, Buffett appeared in the lobby, his presence instantly commanding attention. He walked over to the concierge desk, where the young woman who had tried to intervene the night before stood nervously. "Good morning," he said warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Buffett," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. Buffett smiled. "I never got the chance to thank you for stepping in last night. It's not easy to stand up in situations like that." The concierge's cheeks flushed. I didn't know how to help, but I wanted to do something." "That's leadership," Buffett said simply, recognizing when something isn't right and having the courage to act. "Keep that with you. It'll take you far." The woman's eyes lit up, his words clearly leaving an impact. As Buffett continued to speak with the staff, the atmosphere in the lobby became one of inspiration. Guests arriving at the hotel picked up on the positive energy, some even asking about the events they'd seen online. Meanwhile, outside the hotel, Ellis stood at a distance, watching through the glass doors. He hadn't gone far after being dismissed, his thoughts a storm of regret and uncertainty. Seeing Buffett interact so effortlessly with the staff only deepened his sense of failure. Finally, mustering his courage, Ellis stepped inside. His presence caused a ripple through the lobby, and some staff members exchanged uneasy glances. Buffett noticed him immediately, but made no move to stop him. Ellis approached slowly, his posture slouched, his face weary. "Mr. Buffett," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "May I speak with you?" Buffett turned to face him, his expression calm but unreadable. "I'm listening." Ellis hesitated, searching for the right words. I wanted to apologize again. Not just for how I treated you, but for how I've been running this place. I see now that I was wrong. About everything." Buffett studied him for a moment, his sharp eyes seeming to weigh Ellis's sincerity. Finally, he nodded. "It takes courage to admit that," he said. "But the question is, what are you going to do about it?" Ellis blinked, unsure how to respond. "Words are easy," Buffett continued. "Actions are harder. If you truly want to make amends, show me, and yourself, that you've learned something from this." Ellis nodded quickly, his eyes glistening. "I will." "I promise." Buffett said nothing more, but his silence carried weight. As Ellis turned to leave, the staff watched him go, their expressions a mix of surprise and curiosity. For Buffett, the exchange wasn't about giving Ellis redemption. It was about giving him the opportunity to earn it. True change, he knew, came not from punishment, but from reflection and growth. As the day unfolded, the hotel thrived under its new leadership, the lessons of respect and humility resonating through every interaction. And though Ellis had left, his story was far from over. For Warren Buffett, the focus wasn't on what had happened, but on the future he was building, one where dignity and kindness were the cornerstones of success. As the sun set over the city, the hotel was alive with its usual energy. Guests checking in, luggage carts gliding across polished floors, and soft jazz playing in the background. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. The staff moved with a renewed sense of pride, their smiles genuine, their interactions warm and attentive. Buffett's quiet but powerful leadership had left its mark, and everyone seemed determined to rise to his standard. Upstairs in his suite, Buffett sat by the window, sipping a cup of tea and gazing at the city skyline. The day's events had unfolded as he'd hoped, but he knew his work wasn't done. Transforming a culture required more than one conversation or a single act of accountability. It demanded consistency, patience, and example. His phone buzzed with a call from one of his closest advisors. "How did it go today?" the voice asked. Buffett smiled faintly. "As well as it could have. The staff is energized, the new leadership is in place, and Ellis, well, I think he's starting to understand." "Do you think he'll change?" the advisor asked. "That's up to him," Buffett replied. "I've given him the opportunity. What he does with it is his choice. But I hope he finds the humility he needs to grow." Downstairs, the staff gathered for a celebratory meeting led by the new manager, a seasoned professional chosen personally by Buffett's team. The manager spoke with clarity and compassion, emphasizing the importance of teamwork, respect, and communication. The staff, once hesitant and uncertain, now felt valued and empowered. Meanwhile, Ellis sat alone in a nearby coffee shop, staring at a notepad filled with scribbled thoughts. His dismissal had been a wake-up call, shaking the foundation of his confidence. He replayed Buffett's words in his mind. Actions are harder. For the first time in years, Ellis began to see his own arrogance for what it was, a shield that had blinded him to his flaws. He realized that his journey wasn't over, but he would have to take the first steps toward redemption on his own. Back at the hotel, a family approached the front desk, clearly tired from a long trip. The young concierge, the same woman who had spoken up the night before, greeted them warmly, offering a level of care that went beyond protocol. She had taken Buffett's words to heart, embodying the kind of leadership he had described. As the family was escorted to their room, Buffett entered the lobby, unnoticed at first. He paused by the concierge desk, watching as the staff worked together seamlessly. The energy in the room was different now, hopeful, purposeful. It was exactly what he had envisioned. The concierge noticed him and smiled. "Mr. Buffett, good evening. Is there anything you need?" Buffett shook his head, returning her smile. "No, I just wanted to see how things were going, and I can see they're going well." "Thanks to you, sir," she said sincerely. Buffett chuckled softly. "Not because of me, because of all of you." As he turned to leave, a guest nearby stopped him. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice filled with admiration. "Are you Warren Buffett?" Buffett nodded humbly. "Yes, I am. I just wanted to say, I saw the video from last night. The way you handled that situation was incredible. You didn't lose your temper, and you didn't let anyone feel small. It's inspiring." Buffett's smile deepened, but his response was simple. "Thank you. I believe that respect is a currency anyone can afford to give." The man nodded, clearly moved by the words. As Buffett walked out into the crisp evening air, he knew that his actions had resonated far beyond the walls of the hotel. This wasn't just about one night or one incident. It was about creating a ripple effect, one act of respect at a time. The hotel glowed warmly behind him, a symbol of the changes taking root within its walls. And as Buffett disappeared into the city's bustle, His quiet legacy of humility and leadership continued to grow, leaving an indelible mark on everyone who had crossed his path. As Warren Buffett walked away from the hotel, the weight of the night's events settled in for everyone involved. Inside, the staff carried on with their newfound purpose, their actions a reflection of the lessons they had absorbed. Respect wasn't just a policy anymore. It was a value deeply embedded in the way they operated. Meanwhile, Ellis sat in the coffee shop, staring at the notepad before him. He finally wrote a single sentence. "Change begins with me." It wasn't much, but it was a start. For the first time, he felt a flicker of hope that he could rebuild, not just his career, but himself. He resolved to reach out to Buffett, not for a second chance at the hotel, but to show him he was willing to learn and grow. Back at the hotel, the young concierge who had caught Buffett's attention took her seat at the front desk. As she worked, a guest approached her, handing over a business card. "You handled everything last night with so much grace," the guest said. "If you're ever looking for a new opportunity, call me." The woman smiled, tucking the card into her pocket. She wouldn't need it right now, but knowing her value was recognized gave her confidence she hadn't felt in years. Warren Buffett, now back at his own modest home, reflected on the day as he sipped his evening tea. His phone buzzed with updates, messages of gratitude from staff, reports of improved morale, and even a few stories of customers returning to the hotel, drawn by the viral video of Buffett's leadership. But he set the phone aside. For him, the real success wasn't in the headlines or the buzz. It was in the quiet transformation of people who had learned the power of humility, respect, and kindness. In the end, this wasn't just about a hotel or a disgraced manager. It was about the way people choose to treat one another. Buffett had shown, through action rather than words, that wealth and power mean little if they aren't used to lift others up. His legacy was not in his billions, but in the values he carried, and those he passed on to others. And as the night deepened, the hotel glowed softly in the city's skyline, a beacon of change sparked by one man's quiet but unshakable belief in the power of respect.